Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. That's right, we are back inside of my Insta cave for two reasons. One is because it's like 100 degrees here in August, and number two is because we are checking out the newly updated spider-based power meter from Magene. This is their newest PES 515 power meter, and so in this video, guys, we're going to be going over some of the specs, the details, talk about what changes Magene made to the spider-based power meter, and then the main reason why we're back indoors is because we're going to be comparing the data accuracy of the spider-based power meter to my indoor smart trainer. Huge shout out to Magene for sending me out this power meter. So without further ado, let's begin. All right, so as I mentioned in the introduction of this video, guys, this is the updated PES 515 spider-based power meter from Magene. Now, I have been running the PES 505 power meter for almost 2 years now, and that thing has been fantastic. It's been super reliable, and one of the key selling points to this PES power meter is the fact that the spindle is a 24 millimeter version, which means it seamlessly works with all Shimano standards. Now, if you've been following my channel for some time, you know that I am a huge fan of what Magene does. And what they really bring to the table is they offer quality components and parts at a very competitive value price point. Some of the things that I really love from Magene, things that I have been using on this channel for at least a couple of years, is their wheels, their heart rate monitor, which I've been wearing religiously indoors on Zwift, their radar lights, and then of course their bread and butter, which is their power meter. So this new one we have, guys, like I said, this is their brand new PES 515. This is an update to their 505 power meter. Now, the retail on this, it's still the same. Somehow Magene has managed to make these improvements while still keeping it at a very competitive price point of $299 USD. But let's talk about just some of the highlights that come on this brand new 515 version. So now we have a plus or minus 1% power accuracy, which is now more accurate than the previous version, which was plus or minus 2%. We also get a lighter power meter. Now it's down to 625 grams for the spindle. We now have a longer battery life. We're now up to 330 hours of battery life. The biggest change, what I really appreciate, is now this newest version now fully supports T47 as well as BB386 bottom bracket standards. I know some of the customers and some of the things I've seen online on the forums says that the previous version of this spider-based power meter didn't always play nicely with the T47 bottom bracket, and so Magene has been listening to customers and they finally fixed it for good. And then the main draw to this particular PES spider-based power meter from Magene is the fact that this uses the Shimano standard when it comes to the chain rings. It uses the 110 BCD. So what that means is if you are using just regular standard cranks from Shimano, the 24 millimeter spindle, all you need to do is basically remove those chain rings and then pop this onto the spider-based power meter. And one of the other options and availability of this power meter is the fact that Magene also offers the crank arm lengths in a variety of different lengths, 172.5, 170, all the way down to, I believe it's either 165 or even 160. So good job again, Magene, for really listening to your customers. Next up, let's talk about installing this spider-based power meter on my Polygon Helios A, which is also brand new for 2025. We have the chain ring bolts, we have these rubber washers, which are very, very important, and then we have the main bolt, which cranks and fastens everything together. Next up, this is how you attach the spider power meter to the crank arm. So as you guys can see, there is this lock ring provided by Magene. It's essentially a fastening tool that you can use just a simple bottom bracket tool to fasten this down. Normally Magene includes this in the package, but I didn't get the lock ring tool, but that's okay because I actually have the same lock ring tool from the previous version of the spider-based power meter. My bad, y'all. So this is the adapter that is in fact included within the contents of the box. So with this adapter, you pair it to a bottom bracket tool, 44 millimeters, and then on one side is what goes into the tool like this, and then the other side of this adapter is what goes to this lock ring, which allows you to torque it down. Now, unfortunately, this bottom bracket tool is not a torque wrench, but it's 35 to 40 newton meters, so just make sure it's nice and snug, similar to what you would do when you were are torquing down a cassette or a disc rotor. Magene recommends torquing down these chainring bolts to 10 to 12 Newton meters. So that's what we're gonna do now. And then once we do that, we can go ahead and get this attached back to the polygon. Okay, so we got the first half of the crank installed back on the polygon, and then the final step is to get the other crank arm on here. Now, thankfully, Magene has provided very clear instructions on how to get everything installed, so I'm not gonna be giving you guys a step-by-step on this part, but one of the key things that's really important is, as I mentioned earlier in this video, guys, is Magene provides these rubber washers, and these are very important because you probably can't really tell on here, but on this bolt, which is what fastens everything together, you can see that there is a little gap and there is a rubber washer already installed. You don't want to break that. And then basically every time you remove this bolt, you need to inspect this rubber washer, because if it breaks, you'll need to replace it with this one. So thankfully, Magene provides spares, but just keep that in mind, guys. A couple of points that I do want to highlight on this swap is this bike uses a T47 threaded bottom bracket. On the previous version of the spider-based power meter, the 505, Magene specifies that it was not compatible with T47. Now, if you look online around the forums, you'll come across different consumers and customers that have said that they've been able to use that power meter with no issues. But the good news is with this updated version, it is now compatible, as far as I know, with T47 threaded bottom bracket. So we shouldn't have any issues there. And the second thing I want to talk about is I've had people comment on my video on the previous version of this power meter in regards to loose play when it comes to the power meter. Basically, once you torque everything down, some customers have reported that the crank set overall just became loose over time. So I mentioned earlier that Magene offers really good instructions on how to torque everything down, but basically this main bolt you see right here, this is basically just a preloader. So you only need to load this down like 1 to 2 Newton meters just to remove that initial play. And then we have this 5mm bolt right here, which we're going to torque down to like 13 Newton meters. And then once we do that, there's actually 2 bolts here that we're going to officially secure everything down. So the first initial bolt, which is a preloader, it's a 10mm bolt. Once we torque this bolt down here, we're going to torque this down to the recommended specifications. And then inside is another bolt, you can see is another 5mm bolt that we're going to torque that down as well. So this whole entire system, you need to follow the directions closely in order to make sure you don't have any loose play. And now that we've covered the highlights and some of the details and specs on this Magene PES 515, let's go ahead and deep dive into the data so that we can get a comparison on whether or not this data coming out of this power meter is accurate against my indoor smart trainer. All right, guys, let's hop into the data comparison. So shout out to DC Rainmaker for his analyzer tool. This is a really nice tool. I believe it's like $30 subscription for the whole entire year, and you get unlimited amount of data sets of which you can compare various power meters and its respective data. So on the left, we have in blue, which is my Magene PES 515 spider-based power meter. And then on the right in purple is coming from my Zwift session using the Psych Plus T2 indoor smart trainer. Magene, if you're listening to this, please send me out one of your own in-house Magene smart trainers so that we can do a full-on 100% power data comparison. So I did a 50-minute session on Zwift. Majority of the time I was just kind of noodling around. I did a couple of efforts here. So you can see in this 50 minutes at a high level, everything is pretty much spot on as far as what we can see comparing the two sets of power meter data. But let's dive into some of the more interesting features. So during this 50 minutes, my intentions was to do just a couple of marginal sustained efforts. I did some freewheeling, I did some punches, just to see how the data was going to respond with respects to comparison. So first things first, let's look at this spike right here. I think I did like over 1100 watts. But let's see how the data stacks up. So on the smart trainer at the peak, it says I did 1090, and then the Magene power meter says I did 1127. So that's a little bit off. As you can see, this analyzer tool, it does do its best to line everything up 1 to 1, but clearly there is just a couple of milliseconds of lag with the spider-based power meter versus the more direct power data coming out of the Smart Trainer. So at the peak here on the Smart Trainer, we have 1090, and then on the Magene, it's showing 1127. So that's a little bit off. And then even here, the T2 saying 1092, 1129. So I would say it's pretty good when it comes to those spikes. You know, you have to figure there's so much power and so much torque coming out of the crankset that it's going to be impossible to get this number 1-to-1. And so both of these devices are doing their best to regulate the data respectively. But I would say at a high level, this data is perfectly acceptable in my opinion. So let's move on to another area here. This is a little bit of more sustained here. This is probably like, I think I did another sprint. Same thing here. So you can see how in this case, the Smart Trainer spiked it up. Here, the Smart Trainer had 392 at its peak, and then it just kind of fell off here. But again, guys, all in all, I would say that this is pretty good as far as comparing the two data points here, given this particular moment in my session. I'd say it's pretty much comparable. Let's do this other area here. So I believe here I was like probably out of the saddle. Same thing. You see some spikes and stuff, but all in all, both the Magene power meter as well as my indoor Smart Trainer, it's doing its best to record this data. And according to this DC Rainmaker Analyzer tool, the data is pretty comparable. I don't really have anything to say as far as deep dive goes on this. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, but I'd say at a high level, it's pretty comparable. And then the last one I want to check out is this one right here. I think this was maybe like a 40-second effort towards the end. So boom, you can see right here, this is fantastic. Now, if you notice, whenever I'm sort of spiking the power out of the saddle, that's when both the Smart Trainer and the spider-based power meter, it's going kind of wonky trying to figure out, you know, what that 3-second average power is. But if you notice here, once I'm doing a sustained effort, I remember this was 40 seconds and I was seated at a very smooth cadence of probably like 100 RPM cadence. And you can see this is pretty bang on, and this is what you would expect. And so for most of the efforts we're doing, we're not sprinting every single minute of the hour unless you're doing, 40-20s kind of thing. But when you're doing these sustained efforts, you can clearly see that both of the power meters are very comparable to each other. So kudos to Magene, because this is really highlighting that this brand new PES 515 power meter is in fact accurate against my T2 Smart Trainer. And I've been using this T2 Smart Trainer for almost 2.5 years now. It's been fantastic. I'm sure Magene's own in-house indoor Smart Trainer is also fantastic as well. But all in all, guys, the data is good. The data is exactly what I expected. And even on my Magene PES 505, the previous version of this, I've been using that on my Tavelo Aero, and that thing has been just as accurate compared to my Smart Trainer indoor. So again, guys, kudos to Magene. You guys have a fantastic product on your hand. And the fact that it's only $300 USD, of course, you can buy the additional chain rings. I don't really like those chain rings because the shift quality on the front derailleur, it's not the same as on the Shimano chain rings. So I just prefer the Shimano chain rings. So my opinion is skip out on those chain rings and just purchase the spider-based power meter for $300. So that is going to wrap up today's video, guys. Once again, huge thank you to Magene for sending me out this power meter. Of course, I will continue to be testing and reviewing this just to make sure that the data is still accurate. Questions, comments, and concerns, please feel free to leave them down below, and I will check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.